Welcome to God Just Wins. We're out here in Dana Point Harbor. I'm going to be telling you some stories about the inspiration behind God Just Wins. I reference it as GW, so I may be calling it GW as I talk to you about the message that's extended. And the message is all about hope and optimism and encouragement and living life in a manner that you're looking forward, you're leaning forward, you're excited about what's ahead, instead of what we see so much of today, people that are in retreat, that are pulling back, that are shrinking into the shadows of uncertainty and of the unknowns, and really just captured by a fear-driven life. And so the messaging behind God Just Wins is just the opposite. It's about staring about what's right instead of hyper-focusing on what's wrong. And through that, you develop this habit of looking for what's good. And what emerges in this habit that's being formed is all of a sudden optimism pops all over the place, and encouragement pops all over the place, and this sense of hope pops all over the place. And what transitions is a focus that shifts from hopeless to hope-filled, and shifts from desperation to certainty of knowing exactly where you are, that God's prepared you to be in this exact moment, where it's a challenging season or a blessing or favor, a success, that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, and fully equipped with what you need at the time. And so the stories are going to unfold in that vein and showing us where you can just seek hope and lean forward into life and be excited for life and truly live life as God intends for us to live, being ambassadors of joy and optimism, as opposed to just this oppression of fear. And so welcome to God Just Wins. The irony is that God Just Wins did not start as a ministry. It started as really a foundation from my background of being a coach and having been coached as a professional athlete, and having that influence of coaches and mentors and advisors and supporters that helped leave a thumbprint on who I am. They led, guided, and directed my development. And so in that vein, I like extending messages that steer people in the right direction. And so God Just Wins actually emerged out of a time where my son left for boot camp. And like all military branches, when they first enter into boot camp, there's a 90-day window where there's zero contact. And for my son, it's no big deal. He's on his mission and vision and commission to develop up into his military role and hyper-focused on that. But for me and my wife, we talk to our son every day. And not every conversation is a deep dive conversation. Some of them are just the check-ins. Hi, how are you? Everything's good kind of exchange. And others go deeper. But the point of that is that we have this contact. And for 90 days, it's now a disruptor for me. And so what I chose to do is to write my son a letter of hope and encouragement and optimism, something that he can focus in on and be encouraged during his boot camp. And so for those 90 days, what I learned after the fact was that a lot of his teammates, they would receive perhaps a letter a day or a letter a week or a letter a month or no mail at all. And so for Tate, receiving a letter every day, it was unusual. And so some of his teammates pulled him aside and said, Tate, can you do us a favor? Can you just run a debrief and read us your dad's letter about hope and encouragement as we kick off our training every day? And so he did that. And the cool story that emerged out of that, again, wasn't the purpose of starting a ministry, but the ministry that evolved was the decision to place the GW, or the message of hope and encouragement, on Facebook. And with posting it on Facebook, zero intention of becoming an influencer or having an identity of what audience that it would reach. But the reality was, in the first few months from launching that daily post, it grew to a worldwide audience of 1.8 million people around the world. And it underscored for me the fact that there is this thirst for optimism and hope and encouragement in every region of the world. And people are flocking towards what's right instead of what's wrong, and getting messages of that are inspiring instead of oppressing. And so there then was the launch of GW. Later on, a local radio station, K-Wave, picked up the content and presented the opportunity for me to broadcast that daily message on radio. And so the fast forward, here we are now, broadcasting this daily message of hope and encouragement to all of Southern California, the second largest media market in the world, and giving that message of hope and giving that message of inspiration and having people leaning into something that's good. And so from a simple writing my son a letter of encouragement every day is now reaching tens, maybe hundreds, maybe millions of people. And what a way to be used by God for exactly the purpose that he has for my life, to extend that same messaging of encouragement that I received as a young man, as an athlete, later on as a husband, a father, and with the people that continue to surround me and coach me up. Now I can be a vessel of extending similar messages so that people are trained and focused on what's good in the world, and there's plenty of it. So the question comes up, how do I find hope and encouragement? And what led me to this kind of messaging? And it really started in my development as a young boy. And there were decisions that I made, things that I pursued and got off track with. As I like to say, stupid found me as a young man, and along with it, a lot of bad decisions. And there was a pivot point, and it was actually when I was introduced to tennis as a teenager. And I was in a very dark spot and really filled with messaging from teachers and people that knew me of what I couldn't do. Most people casting out like, he won't become anything. He is failing in life. What can we do just to have him survive? Not even to be a positive influence or a contributor in life. And so much of my young childhood was met with no's. No, you can't do this. You're not disciplined enough. You're not controlled enough. You're not old enough. You're not tall enough. Whatever the case may be, there's always this messaging of why onlookers say you can't do something. And that became my catalyst. It became my fuel. I got excited in a unusual way. When I heard no, it told me I was onto something. And then making that transition from going in past these milestones of yes, and that transition from no, you can't to yes, I can, and really has become the cornerstone for GW. And the podcast of God Just Wins is giving that message of I can, I will, I'm stepping forward, I'm stepping out, I'm stepping up, when perhaps the messaging that comes from those that surround you is, no, you can't. You're going to fail. You can't do it. You're not good enough. Whatever those messages are, but to be able to push away all that negative noise and replace it with things that lift you up and propel you forward. And so all of those no's, they led my path. Being introduced to tennis at really a latecomer to the sport at age 16, where most are, in today's world, transitioning at the most elite levels in their games and their development as athletes. I'm just being introduced to tennis. And I launched then this race to catch up as a teenager, and fell full forward in wanting to pursue tennis, not just as a hobby or a sport, but to play professionally. And from age 16, then seemingly 7 short years later, stepping onto the courts of Wimbledon. And I remember it was such an impact for me, not just because of the tournament, but just the fact that there was so much momentum against me in being able to compete at that level. And don't let me kid you, it wasn't as if I rose to top 10 in the world, but I rose to being ranked in the hundreds in the world and had my chance at competing at the elite level and walking onto the courts of Wimbledon and making a run for it. And so maybe the smallest regret as a professional athlete, I didn't win enough, but I had my chance. And I beat the odds in terms of what people said couldn't be done starting into a sport at age 16 and still being then competitive at the elite levels in the world. And it underscored each time that I heard I can't or you won't, then to stop, stutter step, regroup, and figure out a way to lean forward. And bolstered by then that positive influence of people that are breathing into you, that are creating momentum, that are putting wind into your sails of, I can do this. And so that's how we press forward, with that sense of enthusiasm and that sense of trust that God has you on the path. And it's not about what the world says you can do. It's everything about what God says you can do. That's the fuel. Where I want to see GW develop into, God Just Wins develop into, it doesn't have to have a macro impact. I've had so many examples now of people that were encouraged and coached up and transitioned from that space of the world saying that they're going to fail, and then that affirmation of, did you do it? And part of that stemmed with something that I saw when my kids were young. They had a swimming instructor that was a gold medalist Olympian in the 1984 Olympics. He was at the best of his time. And later, post-Olympics, he just loved working with kids. And so we ended up having him teach our kids how to swim. And the affirmation that he did throughout his training was to put them in whatever swimming environment, put them in the middle of the deep end, have them somehow, some way make it to the side of the pool. And it was always met with a question of, did you do it? And then the staged response of, yes, I did. And so their whole introduction into learning up the skill set of surviving in the water was under the umbrella of, yes, I did. And that always left a thumbprint. And so I have athletes now, I have people that I've coached in business, I have people that I've coached in life, and really where I see this generation coming up, the Gen X and Gen Z generation and the generation that follows, where we're in a world that is heavy right now. There's a weight to today's world, and I see so many young people that are living life head on a swivel, looking for direction. And they're darting left and darting right, and there's the desire for hope, but they're living hopeless in many ways. And so it's to encourage then that same response that my kids received when they were learning how to swim, being met with whatever they pursue, whether they fail in the moment and then push on or have success early on, it doesn't make any difference, but it's met with that affirmation of, yes, I did, and then building off of that and creating momentum off of that, and then having that unleashed to achieve things that they thought were not possible. And there's the beautiful illustration of the word impossible in cutting, scissors to paper, the letters I am off of it and being left with possible. And having that view on life, whatever you are aspiring to, that you can do it. And to extend that message and have them step over boundaries, either imposed or self-imposed, where they have that realization, I can do it, I can chase it. And that's the decision. The destination of how far they chase or how far they push themselves really is not the issue. It's the fact that they stepped forward and are in pursuit at whatever level. And so I want to encourage. And it's been embedded in me. And I want to take that as God's responsibility that he's extended to me to give that similar message and have then the look back for those individuals going, gosh, I was told it was impossible and now I've done it. So the great news about God Just Wins is that there's a lot of ways to become engaged. We have our podcast that you can find on YouTube and Apple and Spotify as one medium. The God Just Wins broadcast that's broadcasting daily on K-Wave throughout Southern California is another medium that you can just program that in no matter where you are and receive that message. We have the encouragement that's on our website, the same name, godjustwins.com, that you can go on to and receive that daily encouragement. And soon to be published, coming up in just a few short weeks, the God Just Wins devotional. And there'll be the audio and the print, the ink-to-paper narrative of all of these kinds of messages that'll help spur you on. So tons of resources for you to become engaged, become encouraged, and to conquer. Thanks so much for watching this and staying tuned. There's so much more to come, and I can't wait to hear your victories as we journey together.